All right, guys, we'll jump in. For those that I haven't met in person, my name's Doug. I'm the broker here at Keller Williams Legacy. I'm excited to teach this class because this is where you make your money, right? This is what Gary Keller wants us to focus on. This is how we leverage our business. Would you rather have 10 listings or would you rather have 10 buyers? The answer is always going to be listings. Even as the market changes, more opportunity to get calls from a sign, advertise things on social media, just build your business, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing it in such a way that you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your clients, and you're able to grow your business in the way that you want to. So there's been a big change in the forms back in this past October. So I'm going to go through the main forms that you're going to see in the context of putting together your listing agreement. Okay. So here's the big one. This is how you get your money, right? The exclusive right to sell residential brokerage agreement. This is not to be used for a commercial property. This is not to be used if it is just a land deal, right? This is your standard residential sale. So the first bit's easy, right? Put in your seller information, put in your brokerage information, and you put in the property information. Okay, the first thing that you really need to think about and make sure it's filled out properly is the type of ownership for the listing. Is it a fee simple listing or is it subject to an annual ground rent? I don't know if you guys have encountered ground rent. It's pretty common in Baltimore City, certain parts of Baltimore County, and almost nowhere else on planet Earth. It's this very strange concept. I think there's a couple of other states that have a little bit of it, but it's sort of a uniquely Baltimore thing. And it basically is this scheme where the sellers, or the owners rather, will own the property. They can do whatever they want to it, but they just also have to pay these ground rent owners some small amount of money, usually every 6 months. It's usually $100, $200, $300. So it's always something that, especially when I'm talking to buyers, I like to make it clear that it's unfortunately pretty common. The other piece of it is that when you're buying a ground rent property, you'll have an opportunity to what's called redeem that ground rent. So you can basically buy out that little lease and then you own it outright. So this is just really important that you make sure when you're speaking with your seller, hey, do you own the property outright or do you have a ground rent? And they should know because they will receive a bill every 6 months or so. So just make sure that that is advertised correctly. You also need to put in, the law requires that all listing agreements have a termination date, okay? Here I put in as an example, 6 months. I see a 1-year listing agreement is extremely common. The only reason I put 6 months here, there are some listing agents that will strategically say, let's say it's a competitive environment, there's a bunch of different listing agents. They might say, oh, that listing agent said it's going to take a year for you to sell your house. I'll do it in 6 weeks, right? So when you put a date on here that's 6 months or a year, just make sure you go that extra mile to say, hey, I expect this to take much less time than that. But what I don't want to put is a 1-year deal where we then have to keep modifying it and having to re-sign everything every month or so. So I like it to be an extended period of time, but just make sure you put in that caveat that you don't necessarily think it's going to take that long to sell. And what I also point out is that you're not locking people in. This isn't carved in stone. I straight up tell people, sure, this is a 6 months or 1-year agreement, but you can fire me at any point. If this doesn't work out, this isn't a marriage, right? So here I put terminable with 5 days written notice. Some people put 10 days, some people put terminable immediately. And for the most part, that's how it's going to work out. If parties are done with each other, it really doesn't make sense for you to hold them hostage to this agreement. But you also, I do actually recommend putting at least a couple of days here, just so, let's say you have an open house scheduled, or you've been hearing about some interest, and it gives you a couple of days to kind of save the deal. So if somebody's frustrated, say, look, you know, I appreciate you letting me know that you're interested in terminating this agreement. The agreement we signed said 5 days. Just give me a few more days to see what I can pull together for you, and then hopefully you go under contract and you're good. Otherwise, you can part ways. Now you also need to put a listing price here for the listing agreement to be completed and enforceable. I don't want you to get hung up on this. Sometimes, especially in preliminary meetings with sellers, you might not have that final price yet. So I just really tell people, look, this can obviously change. If we put 350 and then the house next door sells for 375, we're obviously going to adjust this, right? So I basically see this as kind of an educated guess at this point, and you're really not wedded to it. But you do want to have the price conversation at this stage. For showing instructions, this is where you would ask the seller if they have any special needs, or if there's anything that we need to accommodate. Some people will say, I need at least 24 hours notice. I have 10 dogs and 2 kids and my grandbaby's here. This is where you have that conversation. Sometimes it's, look, I'll get out whenever I need to. They can be very flexible. So you just have the conversation as far as what an expectation should be. And that will then guide you when you're setting up your listing on the MLS. You can say, you can set it up as 1 hour notice, 2 hours notice, go and show. There's all sorts of different mechanisms there. Okay. The next bit you need to go over with your sellers, but it's really not worth lingering. And these are often actually left kind of blank. This is one of the only times as a broker and a lawyer, I want almost no blanks. To put NA, do something, blanks are generally opening things up to ambiguity. Here is where they talk about if you have a really special situation and the seller does not want certain aspects to be advertised. This is where you go in to parts B and C, okay? So part B here says the seller could elect not to have it displayed and marketed on the MLS at all. That's pretty dumb. I mean, if I'm selling your house, I want it to be in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And my best tool available to me is putting it on the MLS. That is why we're being hired in this setting. So I pretty much say, look, you're hiring me to put it on the MLS. That's how we get the most eyeballs on it. That's how we get agents to show buyers. This is considered such a crazy prospect that if they do initial that you can't put it on the MLS, they then have to read the whole box that says, hey, you were screwing yourself over, Mr. Seller. You're actually going to get less money. Please initial that you acknowledge that this is dumb, basically, is what it goes through to say. Similarly, part C, they can elect not to have it displayed on any website, or they can elect to have the property address omitted. Now, again, what is the point of advertising something if you don't put the property address? What are you selling? If you don't put it online, nobody's going to see it. That's how people see things these days. So this would really be only if you were selling Cal Ripken's house, or there was like a high profile political figure that was really concerned about privacy. That's when you can start thinking about this stuff. But for the most part, you're just going to leave B and C blank, because these will be detrimental to your marketing. Okay, and be careful. The reason why these questions are asked, and they're asked in this way, is because this is how it looks on the MLS when you're inserting your new listing. You'll have an option to omit the property address. And I tell you, that looks super confusing. If it pops up on Zillow or something, but without a property address, buyers just have no idea what they're looking at. It looks like a scam, it looks weird. Just be really careful when you're filling this out and also when you are filling in your actual listing details on the MLS. These last couple of pieces are basically requirements of third-party websites like Zillow and Redfin. Okay, so I can imagine a situation where actually a seller might not want unedited comments. Actually, a seller might not want automated estimates to be displayed. Okay, those things are kind of weird, but if you don't say, yes, I authorize this, then it won't populate to Zillow. It won't populate to some of these other places, right? So I pretty much say, if you want to get as many eyeballs as possible, please authorize, please authorize. Coming soon, I think is a really cool tool that not everybody uses because it's a little bit of a pain. This basically gives you the option to pre-market the listing, which is terrific. Now you have to bear in mind that you can, when it's in a coming soon status, you can have pictures, you can have your description up, but you cannot host any showings while it's in coming soon. Okay, so that's the big restriction. And also you cannot have something be listed as coming soon for more than 21 days. Otherwise it automatically kicks over to active. Okay, so the only initial here is just to give us the authority to use coming soon. If it winds up working out, I always say, yeah, go ahead and initial that. And if it winds up making sense, we get the pictures on time and we decide that that's the best way to market your property, that's what we'll do. So I like to just keep myself open to that option. Similarly, just openness to options. Paragraph 8, which is boxed for some reason and all in bold. This basically has to do with if you are hosting an open house and someone at that open house asks you about a property down the road, are you allowed to discuss that? Now, what I generally say to my sellers in that situation is, look, when you sign this listing agreement, I represent you, Mr. Seller. Okay, all this will do is let me have a conversation so I'm not being awkward and standoffish. So if someone asks me about 125 Main Street and your house is 123 Main Street, I want to be able to say, yeah, that one's fine, but it's actually in a different school district, or this one has a bigger yard, that sort of thing, just to open up and make a more organic conversation. Sometimes if they're really fishy and suspicious, they might say, look, I don't want you to talk to anybody about any other property except mine. I said, that's fine. You know, it's not the biggest deal, but it is something I do encourage people to just give me that authority so I can paint the house in the best possible light. Okay, the next thing that they need to sign off on is just an acknowledgement that they're not allowed to record audio of people without their knowledge. So, and this is an important conversation just to make sure that our sellers aren't opening themselves up to liability. So if they do have high-tech security cameras where they're recording people's audio and saving it on a hard drive and using that against people later, it's basically violating the wiretap statute, which says that both sides need to consent to that. I think you could actually have like a nanny cam that records video but no audio. But this specifically, the sellers have to acknowledge, hey, I'm not going to record any audio without people's consent. Don't discriminate, maintain your insurance. And depending on the circumstances, you may be required to have certain repairs done by licensed contractors. Okay, here's the good stuff. This is how you actually get paid. Paragraph 14, this is where you set forth what the seller brokerage is going to get at closing. Okay. From a coaching perspective, we want you to get as much money as you possibly can. We think that you're worth it. We think that we bring value as an industry, especially people that are here. Okay, 6% is probably on the high end of what's considered normal in the Baltimore metro area. So I want you guys to all be the premium offering. I don't want you to necessarily be the discount guy that gives away all our income, unless you really, really need to. Now, that said, we don't micromanage your commission either. If you want to structure your business where you charge a lot less, but you hope to get more volume, that's totally credible. You can go down that road. Okay. So we're not gonna force you to do anything in particular. You guys are running your own business. I can tell you there are other brokerages that will micromanage more. As an example, here I just put it as an example, 6% of the purchase price, you could put 7, you could put 3, you could put 3.5, 5, whatever you think is reasonable. And again, this is for both sides. And you could charge a flat fee in addition to that, if you want to, or if you think you can explain that and get value. So there are some brokerages that say you have to charge a $600 fee and it goes straight to the brokerage, you don't get any of it. We don't mandate any kind of a flat fee. If you would like to charge, what I do think is sort of clever, especially if you use our transaction coordinator service, bullpen property management or bullpen management. I think their fee is $4.95. So that's something that's easily explainable. You can say, hey, this is a flat fee that goes to this, which provides better service for you. So I think that's an easy way to explain it. Some people have higher fees, some people have lower fees. I would just urge you to have an answer ready when your seller says, what does that go to? Okay. Because if you say, oh, it goes to advertising or it goes to technology fees, say, well, isn't that what the commission is for? So you just need to have an answer. But it's totally normal to charge a nominal fee here. And that's something that would just be lumped in with your commission, basically. So it's a way for you guys to earn a few more dollars. This next section I call the "don't screw me over" clause. Basically, what we're preventing, or what this is there for, is you could imagine a scenario where a seller is just about to go under contract or is, well underway, and then suddenly they have an epiphany. Oh, what if I just fire my agent real quick and then I do it on my own, even after the agent brought me this deal, right? So here it says, and I put 90 days, I've seen 120, I've seen 180, I've seen 20. It's whatever you want, but I think it should be a big number, because what it really says is, Mr. Seller, if I introduce a buyer, or if a buyer sees your house while we're under contract for this agreement, I've done my job, okay? So you can't fire me and do it on your own and just save that money. I still did my job, you still need to pay me, okay? And I think this is a helpful thing, and I say it exactly like that. I say, look, we're all nice people here, everybody's doing, I respect you, you respect me. Let's just nip any funny business in the bud, because if they, if the thought crosses their mind, you can point, or they'll remember that you had this conversation, right? Okay, this paragraph right here is often left blank, and I think that's okay. But it's something I wanted to at least talk to you guys about. So this speaks to what happens if a contract falls apart and the earnest money is forfeited back to the seller. Okay, so let's say it's a $4,000 earnest money deposit, and the buyer just, after signing the agreement, they just ghost completely. They don't exercise their contingencies. They just leave. They just change their mind. They don't want it anymore. the agreement would be that, let's say they sort out the release of earnest money deposit, it all goes back to the seller. What this paragraph contemplates is you can have the conversation to say, look, Mr. Seller, this buyer's really harmed you. But the buyers also harmed me as well. Like, I also did my job. We were under contract. It was a lot of darn work. Why don't we split this earnest money in some way? So it's $4,000. Okay, seller, you keep 3,000, I would keep 1,000. I don't know how often this actually comes to fruition either. I think there are times where even if you put 25 or even 50%, wouldn't you then look like a really generous person to say, you know what, technically the brokerage is supposed to get 25% of that, but you can just have all of it. Or why don't we change it to 90-10 and I'll just take 10%. So I like to have this in here because I think it gives you more opportunities for negotiation. But this is totally fine to leave at 0. You kind of do whatever you think is reasonable. Okay, paragraph 15 is important. This is where we discuss what monies are going to go to the buyer agent, right? So we represent the sellers. And there's an important distinction here I want you guys to notice. We said 6% overall is going to be the commission. Here we're saying the buyer would get 2.5%. I am okay if things are not equal. They don't need to get paid the same as you. It's none of their business what you're getting paid. Okay. Now it's probably more often than not in the 5.5% range, and then it is roughly split. But especially high producers, you see people that will absolutely be earning more money than the buyer side regularly, which is another reason why wouldn't it be nice to get more listings, right? Because you just control more of that transaction. So the industry standard, I would say in 90+% of transactions that I see, it is 2.5% going to the buyer agent, which, especially in, the market that we have seen where buyers do a lot of damn work and might lose a lot of contracts before finally getting something underway. So, as kind of a good faith industry standard, 2.5% is, I think, appropriate, but it's ultimately up to your seller. I mean, your seller's filling this out. If they want to give you more money and them less money, that's something you can contemplate, but just have the conversation. If you drop it to 2 or 1.5%, just kind of coach your seller to say, what I don't want to do is discourage buyer agents from bringing that buyer. Because there are buyer agents, I promise you, that they'll look at the split first and say, I'm not showing that house. It's not worth my time. So it's just a conversation about value. Okay, some provisions worth reviewing, but as far as the next thing that they need to sign, it's the smoke alarm notice. We have a smoke alarm. It's a pamphlet that breaks down the responsibilities, depending on when the house was built, the status that it needs to be at. But basically, and this is built into statute, this is not something that's negotiated between the parties. Sellers need to get their smoke detectors in order. If it is more than 10 years old, they have to replace it, no matter the type, no matter the brand, no matter anything. And then it's just going to be a matter of going through, you look at the alarm requirements on this link, and it will tell you, okay, if it's a wired alarm, you have to replace it with a wired alarm. You have to replace of like type. If it is of a certain age, if the house is on the newer side, maybe the alarms need to be interconnected. So these are you just have to go through it all. But again, this is us coaching our sellers to avoid liability. So we want them to know the laws that impact them so that they don't get hurt. And we don't want it coming up after the fact. Let's say the house burns down shortly after closing, and wouldn't it have been nice if the sellers complied with the law? Now they're in trouble. It's not that much money. it's worth just doing it the way you're supposed to do it. Speaking of liability to your sellers, you will sign a lot of addenda about lead paint. Okay, so 1978, you'll see here is the magic number. Your seller is going to have to identify it was built prior to 1978, after 1978, or they don't know. And if they don't know, then guess what? You have to assume that it was prior to 1978, and you need to make sure that all the proper addenda are signed. And make sure they'll also have to initial here on Part B, if certain repairs need to be done that would kick up lead paint, that there's certain EPA requirements as to the type of contractor that you might need and the stringency of safety precautions. So this is kind of a cross the bridge when you get to it sort of a thing, but you want to put it on the radar that houses of a certain age, you may have additional obligations. Okay. Paragraph 20 discusses disclosure of deferred water and sewer assessments. Okay, this is commonly called a front foot assessment. This is this very clever situation where, let's say there's a newer development and a developer needs to spend a lot of money to put in new plumbing, new sewer, running all these lines, right? At some stage, they decided, oh, hey, instead of me just paying for this, I'm going to make all future owners in this development slowly pay me back for my investment that I made. So you'll see in certain communities, it'll be recorded in land records to say, I'm going to pay $400 a year for the next 30 years. And that will eventually reimburse the developer. Now, please read the bold and underlined portion here. If the seller fails to disclose this, and the buyer later comes into this knowledge, the seller can be on the hook for the entire amount. Okay, so huge financial consequences if the seller doesn't properly disclose this. So here's where you, in this box down here, you as the agent, you have this conversation and they have to initial. Basically either that there is a deferred water and sewer charge or there is not. I hate the wording of this paragraph. People will stop reading it, I promise you, just about halfway through. We'll say seller acknowledges that the property is served by public water or wastewater facilities. Let's say, sure, it's served by public water, check. That's not what it's asking. It's not just, is it public water? It's, is it public water or sewage for which deferred water or sewer charges have been established by a recorded covenant. So that means that there is a charge that they're regularly paid and that there's something on land records showing that there's that charge. Okay, so the nice thing is that, well, the nice thing and the bad thing, this is something that is verifiable by us as real estate agents. And it's easy enough and it's within the realm of our expertise, so it's expected that we know this. Okay, so we do rely on our sellers to check yes or no here, but we also need to run that land records check to see if there is a recorded covenant or declaration about this front foot fee. Okay. For offers, the seller gets to decide if we are allowed to disclose existing offers. I always say, Mr. Seller, you should definitely authorize me to do this. My favorite words to say as a listing agent are, oh, we have multiple offers in hand. Everybody just please submit their best and final. Okay, that is the dream. And we're only allowed to say those words if we have this permission. Okay, Because otherwise, if they say do not authorize, and a buyer really anxiously asks you, hey, do you have any offers? Just say, I'm not at liberty to disclose, or I am not allowed to give you that information. Which is a lot less powerful than, heck yeah, I have 2 offers. You really want to submit something soon and it should be high. Just as a heads up, so you don't get yourselves into trouble, you shall present offers in a timely manner, all written offers and counter offers, even if it's already under contract. Okay. Timely manner is a little bit open for discussion as far as what that means. It doesn't have to be that minute. But I don't want you to be accused of hoarding offers and not disclosing them and giving them to your seller in a timely manner, right? So sometimes the seller will say, hey, I'm at work all day. Maybe we'll just look at offers in the evening. So you can collect a couple of offers and then present them later that day, even later in the week if you have that conversation with your seller. Okay, we're going to spend a little bit of time also going through this notice of property condition disclosure disclaimer. On the top of page 7, the seller will have to say whether it is exempt from disclosure laws or it is not exempt from disclosure laws. So your assumption going into pretty much every property is that it is not exempt, which means you need to disclose. But you still need to go through this big long paragraph with your sellers to make sure, okay? So as you look this over, the only exemptions come up at the bottom here. Okay, exempts certain transfers. If it's a brand new home that's never been sold before, if it's new construction, nothing to disclose, nobody's ever lived there. Okay, that would make sense. If it's never been occupied and it just got the E&O or the certificate of occupancy, you're in the clear. If it's a foreclosure sale or if it's an estate sale, those are the 3 situations where you're really going to see this, right? New properties, foreclosures, and estates. So if you're talking to your client and you hear estate sale or you hear foreclosure, this kind of flag can pop up and you can have this conversation. Make sure you dig deeply. But a vast majority are not exempt, so they have to check here, not exempt, and they need to go through the disclosure/disclaimer process, which we'll go over at some length. Here again, we rely on the seller's expertise and knowledge of their own property. In most instances, perhaps in this area, it will not be subject to a conservation easement, okay? But maybe but if they live near water, or if you're in a more rural area near farmland, run through this checklist with your sellers, see if anything pops up in their minds, like, oh yeah, we actually are in a historical trust, or actually, we are in a land trust or an environmental trust. Let them go through this, and if they need to certify if it is or is not. Again, it's always worth checking the land records to see if there is something recorded. So most covenants or an easement, they might say, you can't build along this water line or within X feet of this road or this farm or whatever. Those sort of things are usually recorded. So always look to check the land records as well, in addition to having them, the seller, initial the appropriate spots. And if it is subject to a conservation easement, you want to get a copy. If they don't have it, you need to check that they don't have a copy. Insurance and flood. are really just kind of FYIs. These are required by statute to put in here, so make sure that they understand their responsibilities. And please, please, please do not skip this paragraph just in case. If you are a non-Maryland resident, and this would include if they have an entity, okay? So let's say for tax reasons or whatever, their LLC owns this. If it's not a Maryland LLC, they might be deemed a non-resident seller, and then you need to pay a whole bunch more in taxes, okay? We're not accountants. I don't pretend to be one. I just make sure I see these words. If you are not a Maryland resident, there will be significant tax implications for you. Make sure you talk to a CPA or your accountant, okay? So again, there are consequences for foreign sellers. There's sort of legalese about how the document is constructed. And then here we will check different addenda that we attach to our listing agreement. So we'll go over these momentarily. There's a consent for dual agency, disclosure of what's included, excluded, and what items are leased, and what utilities are there. We mentioned briefly about the disclosure disclaimer. If the property was built prior to 1978, I'm also going to have federal and Maryland lead-based paint disclosures that they're going to fill out. This is where they would, there's a deferred water and sewer addendum if there is that front foot assessment. And finally, we have a statutorily mandated affiliated business agreement because we work with a title company and we are in a situation where we can refer title services. So we're required to disclose that arrangement. So this is the big one. I want to make sure that you guys don't have any questions before I move on to some of the common addenda that you're going to have in your listing presentation.
Affiliated business agreement with the title company because we refer them.
Yeah, so it has to do with lender law. Basically, real estate brokers are lumped in with lenders and other entities that have the special responsibility to make sure that there's no kind of kickbacks or that people understand where their money is going. So it's a strange technical requirement, but this is the phase where we're doing a lot of strange technical requirements. So it's easy to, it's literally a piece of paper and I'll go over it that says, hey, we have a title company that we're affiliated with. If you use that title company or if the borrower uses that title company, Keller Williams Legacy might get $5. I don't know what the exact agreement is, but it's just a required disclosure. Any other questions from Zoom land about the right to represent agreement?
Yes, could you go over number 28 again? The Maryland Residence LLC not licensed in Maryland?
Absolutely, thank you. If the property is owned by a non-resident seller, you need to pay 8% of the total payment. Or if it's an entity, the taxes are even higher. The workaround here. So generally, it's not, it doesn't mean that you can't sell. It doesn't mean that there's no workarounds for this, but it's a conversation that you want to have before listing as early as possible so you can start going down these steps. Okay, so basically you're going to get charged this outrageous tax unless you strike a deal with the comptroller of the state of Maryland. Okay, so I've seen a scenario, for instance, where let's say it was a Delaware entity that was selling this house. They realized this dynamic pretty late in the game. I said, oh crap, let me create a Maryland entity.
Right.
And then, you know, they were in communication with the comptroller. And they learned, oh, there's actually a restriction where you can't just create a Maryland entity and sell out of the house the next day. It needs to have
Fire.
60 or 90 days, something like that.
Okay.
But in that instance, they were able to work with the comptroller. And they actually, I think they got the whole extra tax waived, or at the very least, most of it.
Okay.
So we can sound like the expert when we raise this as an issue early. Instead of it coming up at the 11th hour, it's the day before closing, they get the disclosure that says, I'm paying what in taxes? And they're upset with you. So this is, again, we're not accountants, we can't pretend to be, but you have to ask them, are you a Maryland? You know, they could be my neighbors. I'm gonna ask them to confirm verbally for me that they are Maryland state residents. And I'm gonna ask if it's an LLC, but I'm already gonna know that because I will check the deed and I know who's on land records.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Of course. Any other questions? Okay, we're gonna keep chugging through. So this is actually a brand new form, change of terms addendum to brokerage agreement. So there are actually pretty common ways that you would need to modify your agreement. Okay. If you need to extend the term, if the listing price changes, or there may be some other situation that needs to be adjusted. Now, importantly, there's one change in terms agreement for all the different types of broker agreements. So you see, there's the buyer tenant, there's the right to lease, there's the right to sell residential, right to sell land. This document applies to all of those, but in our situation, we would check the box for exclusive right to sell, because that's the document that it applies to. And then here are the items that we just want our contract and our agreement to be consistent with the contract of sale. So if we see that the term is about to expire, this is where you would go and say, hey, instead of having to redraft another agreement, you say, hey, I think we're close. Let's tack on 2 more months if you're still satisfied with my services. So this is how you keep yourself in that listing agreement relationship. Similarly, the listing price, this is kind of a technicality, but it is important. If, let's say, the brokerage is audited for some reason, or if you are individually audited for some reason, they want to see that your contract price matches what you agreed to sell it for. Okay, so if you guys put $350 in your listing agreement, but you choose to list it for $330, there's a disparity there, right? And we just want to make sure in crystal clear terms that parties are in agreement, right? That it's not you being a rogue agent, it's not the brokerage's lack of oversight, that we have permission to list it for this amount. Because that's the purpose of the listing agreement. Say, hey, I want you to sell it under these terms for this amount. If that changes, hopefully you're going to have text messages, hopefully you're going to have emails, but this helps to protect you. And it's just a quick document. Sure, we said 350, actually want to do 390. We feel really good about the new comps. Just get them to sign off on it. This form is also sort of new. Previous to October of 2022, there was this disclosure, but it wasn't an addendum. It was just the seller was telling the listing brokerage what was included, and then that was uploaded onto the website, and then the buyers had to copy and paste and try to be try not to make mistakes here. So this is a part of the contract. And this is an incredibly important document for you as the seller agent, okay? Excuse me. Me personally, if I'm having this document prepared, I don't want to touch it. I don't want my pen to be on it. I don't want myself in a perfect world, me to click very much. The sellers are the ones deciding what is for sale. I don't want to make any assumptions and say, oh, well, I remember there was 2 refrigerators and I marked 2 there. But meanwhile, they only really wanted to sell 1. They were going to take the other one to their new house. Or people will forget. They'll go through. I had a seller that halfway through the contract, like, hey, Doug, can we take the curtains with us? I'm like, I don't know. What did you check? Did you say that curtains were included? Then no, you cannot take them because you're selling them curtains. Okay. So have them fill this out. I've heard horror stories about people where the agent messes something up or fails to circle or check something. And then suddenly that agent is on the hook for a new refrigerator that the buyers were expecting, but the sellers aren't providing. So just be really careful. Additional inclusions and exclusions are for your kind of oddball items. Let's say you have a shed, but it's kind of a portable shed that you can remove or is maybe on wheels. You can make it clear that that is included, okay, if you have that conversation. Exclusions are maybe even more important. If you have a seller that has a family heirloom mirror or chandelier or something that really is a fixture, but they intend to take with them, you can do that, but you better specify. Otherwise, they're going to come after, the buyers are going to come after the seller and say, no, 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 that's a fixture. You need to leave that chandelier. So if there's something that's special to your sellers, make sure that that's understood up front. And in a perfect world, if they have a chandelier that they're taking with them, I want that removed before showings take place, right? Because I don't want a buyer falling in love with that chandelier and then coming to find out later on that it's not a part of the house. So that's just a conversation to always have. Hey, is there anything that you're taking off the walls or out of fixtures that you're bringing with you? So you can make sure that you're disclosing what you need to disclose. If anything is leased, if you have a propane tank, if you have a solar system, if you have an oil tank that is leased and you have a recurring payment on, you need to disclose that. This is also very important. People very much care. There are people that won't buy a house if it doesn't have natural gas on their stoves. There are people that won't buy a house if it has oil heating. Okay. I see this left blank an uncomfortable amount, and I know times where it has been litigated. People get pissed if you say it's electric heating and they find out, and buyers find out that it's oil heating after the fact. They will sue your seller, and your seller will come after you and say, we didn't talk about this. I didn't understand this was important. You saw that I left it blank. You didn't say anything. This is all important stuff. And again, seller knows this a heck of a lot better than you do. So you need to have them take the lead on this. Now, don't be a pain if they ask you to fill it out on their behalf. Be helpful in ways that you need to be helpful, but make sure they review it, make sure they sign off on that exact version, okay? Okay, disclosure disclaimer laws. This is the super fun one. That's a lot of legalese that has to be in this contract. So again, we talked briefly. There's some really narrow situations where you are exempt from these disclosures. Brand new house, foreclosure sale, estate sale. Everything else, you have to go through this process. So the first document is just literally a notice of this disclosure disclaimer law. It just spells out what the law is. And we know this is important because buyers and sellers have to sign every page. and even the agents need to execute this, okay? This should be a red flag that this is an important responsibility for you as an agent. Okay, so you always have to provide the notice. Then there's the residential property disclosure and disclaimer statement. Note this is the disclosure and disclaimer. This is a 4-page form that is almost deliberately confusing. The way that it's laid out is foolish to me, but you guys are going to be experts and you're going to explain it, and it's going to be a little bit silly, but it's going to be fine. So the law states that you will either, or the sellers rather, will either fill out a disclosure or a disclaimer. Okay? If you fill out the disclosure, it's going to be the first 3 pages. 1, 2, 3. And everybody's going to sign the disclaimer, or the disclosure rather. The disclosure is really involved. It's a lot of stuff. You're going through basically every important utility and zoning and possible inspection item and verifying whether or not it's in good working order. This is great. If you have an opportunity, if you have a seller that says, yeah, I feel great about all this stuff, this is like an opportunity to brag on your property, Mr. Seller. Say, hey, oh, not only is the water running fine, they can write in, I just had all the plumbing replaced in 2019, or main sewer line replaced in 2021. This kind of gives you the opportunity to fill in a little bit of that context. Okay. Now, what a lot of people will do, I would say it's a vast majority, they look at those 3 pages and they say, man, that's a pain in the butt. Okay. So the other option to the sellers is the disclaimer statement. So it's either pages 1 through 3, disclosure, or you just fill out page 4, the disclaimer. Now, the disclaimer basically says, this is an as-is sale, Mr. Buyer, buyer beware. Except, this does not let you lie about your property. This does not let you hide health risks from a potential buyer. This is a very important conversation that we need to have with our sellers, that they need to disclose latent defects. And you can go to this piece of paper and it says exactly what a latent defect is. Okay? Latent defects are defined as a material defect that a purchaser would not reasonably be expected to ascertain or observe through careful visual inspection, and would pose a direct threat to health and safety. So basically it's hidden and it's dangerous. Okay. If the seller knows there's moisture issues, and guess what? Moisture means mold, and mold means a health risk. That might not be, they might not be able to identify that just by putting their eyeballs. It hasn't rained in a while, they don't see that the basement gets wet all the time. If you know that every time you flip a light switch, that socket over there shoots out a spark, that's a hazard. That's not readily ascertainable and is dangerous. If you're a seller, you have to disclose these things. Okay. If you do not, and a subsequent buyer is able to prove, hey, Mr. Seller knew about this and he didn't tell me, that's how you find yourself in court. That's how you get yourself in trouble. So this is not us being narcs or trying to like make their lives difficult. This is us protecting our sellers. That is what this document is about. So we need to make sure that they understand their legal obligations. This is a Maryland state law. It has nothing to do with us. But they have to check yes or no. And it might be yes. Upon heavy rain, basement is wet. In a perfect world, they can say no, check that box, and they've satisfied their obligations. And this also, as just kind of an aside, as a listing agent, this gives us the opportunity to talk about. So I had a property that when it rained a lot, the basement got wet. And I could kind of tell that, hey, there's probably been some drywall repair in that corner. So you kind of ask, hey, what's that about? And then I come to find out when I was going through this paragraph specifically, is like, ah, crap. Okay, Doug, let me show you. And it shows me, where it gets wet. And I think it's because of this grading issue. We were able to have that conversation. I was able to recommend a waterproofing company that was able to get it fixed up for about $3,000. Okay, that's not a small amount of money. But instead of them having to disclose and say, basement gets wet, we don't know why, basically. Instead, we were able to say, instead of basement gets wet, lifetime transferable waterproofing for the basement. So we turned a serious defect into a benefit that we could advertise. So it's really important to let them make those decisions. And we can provide our expertise to say, look, when you disclose this, it's like, you're kind of putting a clearance sticker on your property because people know that there's something wrong and they're going to lowball you based on that. And that may be totally reasonable, but that's your opportunity to have the repair conversation in advance. Are there any questions about disclosure disclaimer? I know this is kind of a sticky topic and a really important responsibility that we have. Okay. Just a couple more documents. On the seller side, I try to have them sign off on the consent for dual agency in advance. To explain dual agency is a little bit complicated to sellers that haven't gone through real estate school, but basically how I like to describe it is, Mr. Seller, there is a chance that someone else from this brokerage brings a buyer to you. If you don't allow dual agency, you're removing 300 plus agents from bringing you buyers. Okay, and if they have any questions about what that means, so I'll always say, in my opinion, I think it would make sense to allow dual agency. The reason why that is hypothetically introduces a contract, because me as broker, I oversee y'all. So conceivably, like, oh, well, if the broker is overseeing, couldn't there be a conflict of interest? What this builds in is that, sure, both people work for the same brokerage, but their ethical responsibilities are to their own clients. And it spells out specifically, you're not allowed to share confidential, you're not allowed to share pricing terms, you're not allowed to share why people are buying or selling. Anything that relates to negotiation strategy. So if people are concerned about it, I just walk them through 1 through 5. So I encourage, so in most situations, my sellers will sign off in advance that they're okay with dual agency. They would sign here. And then if dual agency actually comes to pass, if the Keller Williams legacy agent brings you a buyer, they would then affirm it again. So they sign at first just saying, hey, I'm open to it. And then when it actually happens, you're going to have everybody sign the affirmation. That's just the second part of that same form. All right, any questions about dual agency? This is different from representing both sides of a transaction, right? This is just agent A and agent B who happen to be affiliated with the same brokerage. If you are in a situation where you feel like it is even being perceived that you are representing both sides, please, please, please be careful. It is actually impossible to represent truly both sides because there is an inherent conflict, okay? Now, there are scenarios where you can say, oh, I represent the seller. I can help you out, Mr. Buyer. If you tell me what to write down, I will write it down for you, but I can't give you any special insight. I can't really talk to you about strategy. So you can go down that path, and there are ways to be helpful, and people build that in as a part of their business, but just be careful. It is legally and physically impossible to actually represent the best interests of both sides. So just tread lightly. If you have any questions, a situation like that comes up, ask me, ask somebody in leadership. We'll work through it. Finally, is this affiliated business arrangement disclosure that I was mentioning. It literally says, hey, we have a company called First Pitch Title. First Pitch Title has a business relationship with Keller Williams Legacy. They charge a fee for services. Please acknowledge that you've received this disclosure. Now, I'm actually trying to change this, but this is how it reads on the RESPA legal forms database, where it says borrower here at the bottom. Even if they're not borrowers, that's just where your clients need to sign. We are basically lumped in with lenders as a brokerage. It's kind of a legal oddity, but this is just where they would sign, just acknowledging, hey, we understand that you have this business relationship. Thanks for letting us know. So those are the big ones, guys. That's what's going to come up that you're going to need to have signed and filled out in advance for pretty much every listing that you're going to have. And these are going to be the documents that you're then going to upload into Bright in the little file section. You do not need to upload your exclusive right to represent. Your listing agreement is just property of you and the brokerage. But all these other things about the disclosures, disclaimers, what's included, consent for dual agency. You know, if it's a Baltimore County, you want to upload your local jurisdictional requirements, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Harford County, Howard County, whatever. General addendum. There's a whole checklist of things that you're going to want to make sure that are a part of your final contract. But these are the big things that you're going to need to really talk to your clients about. They're going to have questions about, and you're going to sound super smart because you know all the answers. All right, are there any final questions before I let you go? We're wrapping this up a little bit early for you.
I do have one about the affiliate business agreement.
Yes.
You said that one is filled out for the client. Now, to say that you have a business relationship with First Pitch Title Company, now is that to be given to them whether they use them or not, or just if they use them?
No, that's correct. It is whether they use them or not. We just need to disclose that we have a business relationship with this place that we can hypothetically refer you business to.
Okay, thank you.
Very broad. And it's also silly that we need to do this for sellers because buyers are really the ones that are choosing the title company 99% of the time. But basically the way that the law is written, because we are in a position to give a referral, and we are, there are sellers we could say, hey, you should like this. Maybe you should give more weight to this buyer because they're going to use a title company that I like. And this also, when you do this for your buyers, this is an opportunity for you to say, look, we do have a business relationship with these people. But myself as an agent, I don't earn a damn dime for referring these people, right? So you make it clear that you're not sort of compromised. And you can say, look, I encourage you to look at as many places as possible. But I know this company. I know that if I call them, they'll pick up the phone. Bob Flynn, who owns the company, the attorney, is sitting in the hallway right now. And he answers the phone when I pick it up as broker. So we just have more communication and more infrastructure with them. So that's kind of the selling point. But yes, regardless of whether they use them or not, whether it's a buyer or a seller, this is just a document that we need to put out there.
Okay.
I asked you a question.
Of course.
So there's a lot of forms we get them to sign, but can you just go over the ones that you said you have to upload and write? It not go over them, but the names of them are the.
Yeah, so
Well,
there
explain.
should be. If you go to the resource page where we have kind of the frequently asked questions for the brokerage.
Okay.
I don't know, are you familiar with that page that I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
Yeah. So the resource page is amazing. There are checklists for buyers and sellers. So you can go into those checklists. And also, if you go into the compliance part in command where you go to documents where you would actually upload everything,
Mhm.
each document, every single document is itemized there and it's listed as either required or optional or conditionally required. So a lot of them, like the property inspection addendum is going to be included in almost all of them, but it's not technically a required form because they could waive the inspections.
Okay.
Same with financing, right? Usually they're going to have financing, but maybe it's a cash deal and that's not required. So you just kind of have to go through, but the big ones that I'm going to look for from a compliance standpoint, if you do want to just take a couple of notes. The general addendum to the contract of sale, which is a GBBR form. We like to have that in every contract. This affiliated business agreement is going to need to be signed by all your clients. Whatever the local jurisdiction is, they're going to have their own addendum. So there's a Baltimore City one, a Baltimore County one, all the different counties are going to have their own addendum. The notice of disclosure disclaimer. The actual disclosure disclaimer. And then almost everything else is really contextual. If it's built before 1978, you're going to need lead. If it's tenant occupied, you're going to need a tenant. If it's a mortgage, you're going to need some financing. But
And this one is the agreement business.
yeah,
affiliated
this is
business,
the
okay.
affiliated business.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yes. That's in there for us.
Yeah, yes. And if you ever have any questions, all these resources are meant to be kind of dynamic things, and we're always trying to improve and change. So if you see, hey, wouldn't it be good if we had a checklist for this? Or like, I think I do need to add the affiliated business agreement to a checklist or two. Like, we're always trying to sort of make this better and easier, because it's a lot of forms, right? And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? But I want, I'm just trying to put you in a position where you can sound like an expert when they ask you the harder questions. So that's what I'm trying to focus on. We have a compliance department, we have a coaching team that can put eyeballs on the contract for you before you submit it. You know, we're happy to help with that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, just another question on I think it's a general addendum where
Okay,
you have the listing price. So are you saying that we need to get from the seller the highest and then the lowest amount they're willing to go in the sale of their property? And-
can you try to ask that in a different way? I'm having trouble.
Okay, if you could go to the general addendum, I think it was the last option, last point, listing price.
Sorry, you're saying general addendum.
Oh, I hope I'm saying the right one. It's the first document after the contract, after the listing contract.
Okay, so there's the listing agreement and then,
The addendum is the first one from the addendum.
okay, the change in terms.
Yeah, so the listing price, number 2.
Okay, so, and thank
Can
you,
you scroll up? No, can you scroll down a little?
yes,
Okay, so you're saying that the listing price, you're saying that should be a range, right?
no,
Okay,
what this is for. This second document, the change in terms addendum to brokerage agreement. All this does is change a term of the brokerage agreement, right? So going back to the brokerage agreement. Oh, this is really. There is a price that we put in here, right?
right. Mhm.
First page, thank you.
I think you put 300 or something.
Yeah, so I think I put 350.
350, okay,
Okay, listing price number 5, 350.
right.
And that's just me sitting at the kitchen table with Mr. Seller. Hey, I think your house is worth about 350. We'll fine tune it a little bit while you're getting the house painted and doing whatever. But let's just get this listing agreement executed. We'll put 350 now. It's subject to change. 2 weeks later rolls around. We're ready to put it on the market. Mr. Seller says, Doug, I know we talked about 350, but we've really looked at data together. I think 370 is where I want to start.
Okay,
So I say, great. Just so my paperwork is in line and it's clear that I have the authority to increase that purchase price. I'm going to get the change in terms addendum for this document only. So this is purely internal bookkeeping.
okay, got it.
This document, the representation agreement doesn't get uploaded to Bright, and neither does the change in terms, right? This is just our representation and our understanding.
Okay, got
So
it.
if that number changes. I want documentation that says I can change that number, and then that documentation is going to match the listing price that I put on the MLS.
Okay,
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
And again, that's a new form, that change in terms agreement for the brokerage. The brokerage agreement is a brand new form that people are figuring out how to use, but it's really just going to be used for extending the term of the agreement. If you were up until the end of January, you go to Mr. Seller and say, hey, we're really close. I know it took you a little bit longer you needed to waterproof your basement and get it painted and such, so we didn't even get started until 3 months in. I think we're close. Let's do another 4, 6, 12 months. And then you change it on that same change of terms addendum. All right, anything else, guys? Still have me for a little longer. Nothing.
This,
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys truly for taking the time. I'm here if you have any questions. Coaching and leadership is here for you guys. Hopefully this is helpful. We also have, I mentioned that resource page. If you don't have that resource page, email me and ask for it. It's on the signature block of everybody in leadership. If you've received anything from Melissa or Alana or Crystal, there's a link to the resource pages there. There is a contracts playlist that myself and the coaching department went through, where if you have a question about a particular document, you can watch a 5-minute video where we go through all the blanks, sort of like I did here. There's also the checklists. There's how to get paid. There's videos on how to work with Command and DocuSign and all this stuff. So I know it's a lot out there. But resources are available to you and we're always building it up. So if you ever need anything, let me know. All right, guys, thank you. Have a great day.
thank you.
Thank you.
What about help with